the World Jewish Congress, Dan Diker, who's probably one of the finest human beings that I know. And anyway, what can I tell you about this story? It is a story of miracles, adventure, passion, and a mission. One day, in May of 2003, we had just arrived in Baghdad a few weeks before. I get a phone call from Ahmed Chalabi. Ahmed Chalabi was the head of the Iraqi opposition, a guy that the American government loved to hate, which is probably, he's one of the most remarkable people I've ever met in my life. And he historically had a great relationship with Jews. During the Farhud, the pogroms against Iraqi Jews in 1941, his family saved Jews. He never told me that. It was Jews in London who were saved who told me that. And when I told him, why didn't you tell me? This is a guy I know very well. He said, why should I tell you that? It just, you know, it's a no, Anyway, one day he calls me. He said, Harold, we're both in Baghdad. He said the head of the Jewish section of the Iraqi the intelligence Jewish section has just come, and what happened was, if you worked for Saddam, you looked for opposition, you looked for people who were now going to form the new government, and you came to tell all that you did. Hopefully they give you a pass. Hey, you're cooperating with the new guys. So, as I said, this is a story of miracles. He comes to Ahmed Chalabi and says, I was the head of the Jewish section. There is an ancient Talmud there from the 7th century, written on the word he used in Arabic, jild, which is like skin or parchment or something like this. And that would be a wonderful thing to find. We didn't find it in the end. There wasn't one such a thing, but it shows how much they understood about Jews. Because all Torahs and everything are written on parchment. They're written on, this is kaf, you have to do it. But he didn't know this, and he was head of the Jewish section, so it really explains in the end how much they knew. Anyway, he said, I'll show you where this place was. So he takes, Chalabi instantly calls me and Judith Miller, who's formerly of the New York Times, who was also in Baghdad, and he takes us to the head, into the intelligence. This is the central, what remains, if you wish, of the intelligence section. There were a few bombs dropped there, and he shows us where it is. On the side of the building, you see 2 windows. He points down there, and you see there's a big hole in the window. Excuse me, in the window. You see a hole out of the building, and something here comes out and lodges here. What is this thing? This is a 2,000-pound bomb, live. I didn't know it, even though I worked at the Pentagon for so many years. I am not a military guy. I don't know these things. I hugged this thing at one point. I said it's a story of miracles. We worked in and out of this place for 6 weeks. It never exploded. It came through the building. And it didn't explode, but it destroyed the water system. And all of the water kept dripping down into the basement. So the place got flooded. Anyway, I don't know what you can see here. This is the first day that we went down there. Can you see here? You can see how high the water is. This is about, that painting is about half, you can see half of it. The other is underwater. If you look at me here, the water was up to where like my belly button is, my navel. Now this is a picture of the Kibbutz Selah, the Dome of the Rock. And there's a little guy standing on the side in red, and that's Saddam with a rifle raised there. He was going to liberate it. Anyway, we're there, and we see this. And the guy from the archives, the guy who worked for Saddam's Jewish section, promptly disappeared. Somewhere in the deep recesses of my mind, I'm sure I know his name and what he looks like, but this is 10 years ago, and I promptly forgot it back then. Anyway, you see this picture here. I'm sorry I don't have a laser pointer. You see the upper line here. We walk. The upper line is where the water was. And Chalabi, as I mentioned, the one that our government, is not particularly happy with. Chalabi said two things to me. He said, look, what are you going to do? Well, look, I'm a Jew, and I'm an observant Jew. He said, I'll get you workers, and I will get you a pump, and we'll try to pump the water out of the building. You saw how big that building was. So for 2 days, what? Oh, sorry, guys. Wait a minute, that's all right. Okay, so for 2 days, they pumped the water. I'm sorry we don't have a ruler or something, but you can see there's a line in the middle here. The water goes down to, you can see how low it is, and that's about ankle level. Anyway, these guys walk in. First they saw the Israeli section. The Israeli section is where that thing was that you just saw. The poster, not the poster, the oil painting. And then, at the end of the corridor, on the left, is the Jewish section. Now, all this stuff was underwater. I think you probably can recognize that the guy there is me 10 years younger. And you can see all of this is strewn with underwater. You know what a boat feels like, which is waterlogged? Pick it up. There were 2,700 books here in the end. Unbelievable. And more importantly, as you will hear from Edwin when he speaks later, there were all these documents from school records of Jews. All sorts of amazing things. Well, we'll get to the question in a moment of why they were there. Now, one of the gentlemen who's in this picture here should be in this audience somewhere. I saw him earlier. Max, where are you? Okay. Max here came to help on the whole thing with Chalabi, on the transition. We got these books out. Chalabi gave us a field, it's not a field, what do you call it? A courtyard of this art gallery, which was part of his headquarters, where we dried the stuff out. The American government wasn't the slightest bit interested in helping me. If I was nothing more than this beautiful Hebrew word, netel. I was like an albatross. Who needed this project? Don't worry, in the many miracles that are going to happen, it of course got saved. Anyway, so no one would help me, and there was a wonderful archivist, and she wasn't allowed to talk with me. Well, so what happens, there's a friend of some of us here, Moshe Weiss, here in Jerusalem, and I spoke with him pretty much every day when I was in Baghdad, and he went to the Hebrew University, rather to the National Library Restoration Section, and this woman is trying to give me, over the phone, instructions on how to take care of this. Now, there's only one problem. In the shade here, it's about 115 degrees. What is that going to be about? Like 49 degrees, 48 degrees. And it's humid. And there is no electricity. Yeah, I lived in the room in the palace with broken windows and no electricity. And imagine, it was kind of humid. Anyway, she's telling us we got to put it in coldness. I said, look, we don't have any. You should do the best you can. When we tried to dry this stuff out, we put them in this field here. And that's Max here talking on a satellite phone to wherever he was. We could talk with Israel from there. That was not a problem. And we did as best as we could. A problem, you can't put a Torah on the ground. But this was underwater. And if you don't do something about it, it becomes like a straitjacket. And so, from a Hasidic rebbe, not a rabbi, the head of one of the Hasidic groups here, he's giving me instructions. He says, what you're doing is pikuach nefesh. It is saving a soul. You must put this on the ground. What did we do? We put it on the ground and rolled it up afterwards so it was still alive. And we put them in aluminum trunks, which you see behind here. I don't know if you can see. I'm the guy in the middle. Dan Diker is the former head of the World Jewish, Executive Director of the World Jewish Congress. And if anybody knows this, there's a wonderful Turkish woman named Aydan. We put them in all these containers which Chalabi gave us. Okay. This can't go on, the amount of money and all this. Through a wonderful friend, we got to Harvey Kruger, who was wealthy donor, yes. In New York, overnight he arranges money to help pay for these things, and everything is fine. Now, where were these records? Here is the Meir Twig synagogue. It's the last functioning synagogue. As the Jews left, the records were being put in the second floor. You can see here of the synagogue. And one day in 1980, Saddam sent his henchmen up, and they stole it all. The fact that these records were stolen, the Jews were not allowed to take them, becomes very important what happens to in their future. Anyway, he calls, and finally, there was a minister at the time, we all know the name Natan Sharansky. He used to call me every week in Baghdad to see that I'm alive. Whatever, we're friends. And one of the things he did was, he said, I told him about this. He said, what can I do? I said, call your friend Cheney, Vice President Cheney. And then Richard Pearl, who was the Jackson-Vanik Amendment he was responsible for, he would call. And he said, what? He was head at the time what was called the Defense Policy Board. I said, tell Rumsfeld. The next day, they brought it up on one of these video conferences from the people in Baghdad, and all of a sudden the American government, thank God, takes over the project. And I want to tell you, when the American government wants to, it can do unbelievably amazing things, the capabilities of the American government. They took over the project, the stuff was then shipped out to the United States, and that's all fine and dandy. Now, I told you there were miracles and all sorts of amazing, amazing things that has happened here. At the exhibit in Washington, part of the Torah is exhibited. Now, what does this? It happens to be my bar mitzvah portion. Believe me, they had no idea it was my bar mitzvah portion. But what is it? It's Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha me'artzecha el hamakom asher ar'eka. Take me from the place that I'm in, Iraq of today, to the place I will show you. Where do these archives belong? We know where. Look at this wonderful lady here. She was the archivist who I said wanted to help me but couldn't. But when the American government took over the project, she was great. What happens with her? What does she tell me? They froze all these things and took them to Houston, where they were trying to, the beginning of the process of restoring. They're in a tiny plane. She leaves on the plane with Baghdad with all of the material in these frozen boxes. They were solid blocks of ice, brown ice. They land in Rhodes. It's the middle of the summer at a NATO base. And she, in order to refuel a small plane, you got to turn it off. If you turn it off, no electricity, everything starts to melt. She starts to fight with the head of the base on the phone, radios for electricity. He doesn't want to give it to her. Finally, he says to her, I don't know what's going on. I'm coming out to see what it is. And she said, and she's not a Jew, she says, and the guy walks out, and she looks, and amazingly, the guy is an Orthodox Jew and has a kippah on his head. There was, of course, no problem getting electricity after that. And that's this wonderful lady here. I think we're through with the pictures here. I just want to give 2 more minutes. When I say coincidences and miracles, I've talked about a lot of them. I think, basically, maybe I've got them all. You cannot imagine how wonderful this is. The Iraqi Jews were not allowed to leave with anything, basically, or one suitcase, so they came with some clothes. This isn't everything. Edwin, are you going to talk about what we think is in Iraq?
Whatever you talk about.
Look, Edmund left Iraq in 1970, and believe me, I know the black and white. Edwin knows the gray, which, believe me, in the end is much more important. I think at the moment we will leave it there, and thank you very much, and I hope I didn't bore you.